Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, in which I'll be explaining why analytics should be included in the solutions you offer your customers and how Yellowfin can help you do it. We're starting right on time. We've got a few people in the audience. Might keep talking just for a moment or two and see if we get any slight latecomers, but welcome everyone today. Just looking around, I can't tell whereabouts in the world you're all from, but we've got an interesting selection. We've got people from financial services, legal services, computer services, so quite a mixture so far, and a few I can't quite identify, so apologies if I missed you out. So I'm Rob Jones, Yellowfin Solution Architect, covering the EMEA region. I've been with Yellowfin for just over a year now, having spent most of my career working in and around business intelligence and data integration, and most of that in the retail sector, primarily with the John Lewis Partnership here in the UK. But of course, retail doesn't just sell things. A big organization like any others has purchasing, logistics, HR, finance, IT, and all the other functions that you find in any large organization. So applying BI to all of those has been interesting. And with Yellowfin, I get to apply it to a whole range of other things I probably wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So our session today is scheduled for an hour, and there's a lot to get through. If you do have questions, then pop them in the chat window, and I'll try and pick them up at the appropriate point. Any that I don't get a chance to cover today, I'll try and pick up afterwards. So as you see on the agenda, we'll work through the 5 reasons to include analytics, 5 reasons to use Yellowfin to do that. We'll have a bit of a live demonstration, take any Q&A that have come up, and then talk a little bit about what could come next. So let's get to it. So 5 reasons to include analytics. In this section, I'd like to explain why we think just about every solution provider should include analytics as part of their solutions. Of course, some solutions are all about the analytics, but for others, analytics isn't the primary focus, but that doesn't mean they're not important. Let's see why that is. So, first of all, your customers want and need analytics, at least they should. If customers and prospects are not asking you about analytics, then you might have a problem. Now, why is that? Well, as we see it, either that means they don't see the need for analytics, and quite frankly, that probably means they're not going to be in business very long in today's market, or they think they already know how to report and act on all the relevant metrics. And if that's the case, then maybe you should think, well, are they seeing my solution as a commodity, and am I vulnerable to being swapped out? Just something to think about on that front. But let's assume that your customers are asking for analytics on the positive side, and or asking you for data, and have a little bit of a think about, well, what kind of data should you provide to them? I mean, on this slide, we've talked about data-driven incremental improvement. So, they need the data to see how they can improve their business. So your job is to help them to get the information they need to do that. I mean, an obvious starting point for that is usage metrics. And that's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, you're providing them with a service. They're presumably paying for it. You need to show them that your solution is actually being used. And if it's not, then both you and they want to find out about that sooner rather than later before it becomes irretrievable. Then the second reason, and it's kind of closely related to that first one, both you and, again, your customer want to see the solutions being not just used, but used properly. For example, are the system's recommendations being viewed and followed? You should provide this kind of information at individual user level so that training needs can be identified. It's also a great way to identify solution champions and power users amongst your client organizations that you can consult with before making any changes. The other side of things, moving on from usage metrics, you're looking at solution effectiveness. And I suppose this touches again on is the solution being used properly? I would think that you're going to be very familiar with industry best practice in whatever industry you're in and know what the appropriate KPIs are going to be. So we would encourage you to think really carefully about how using your application helps to move the needles the right way on those KPIs, and then provide analytics which show both those key business metrics and the usage data from your app which influence them. So if you know that you need to do certain things in your application to drive business performance the way that your customers are going to want it, think about how you can provide analytics which will demonstrate that your app's doing that and being used to drive the outcomes they're looking, and really demonstrate the value of your application to your customers. Now, you may have all the data that you need to do that already, or you may need to provide a mechanism for your customers to upload some of it. So if you're providing recommendations, you might want to provide a way for them to upload outcome data, which you can then use to report in the KPIs on performance, showing how your solution has contributed to their business performance. Just some example charts on here of different industry sectors. They can look quite different depending on what the sector is. So most organizations will try to minimize the number of suppliers they have to manage. That's because each supplier that's on the books is costing them money, as their procurement department will keep telling them. They may deliberately multi-source some things, either for resilience or to promote competition, but for the most part, they'll favor solutions which involve fewer vendors. And this is certainly something that I found when I was working in the retail sector, is, if we could get a solution from one vendor or two vendors rather than four, we'd go for the one with the small number of vendors, because it's just easier to manage. You know who to come after when there's a problem, and it often ends up costing you less. But you want to stand out from the competition. And to do that, you need both a great solution and the right approach to customer engagement. And including relevant analytics can help with both. And that's by broadening your solution scope, so they don't need to go to another vendor to fill in their analytics gaps. And also by giving you something to talk about. Business metrics provide both a common language and great conversation openers. You can use the metrics that your application is providing to review performance and make suggestions on how they can improve their results, which helps to establish your credentials as a true partner and potentially identify opportunities for additional consultancy or service engagements. There's another benefit. If you include usage metrics in your review sessions, then you can get a clear picture of how your product is being used, what training may be required, and when new licenses might be needed, all without the need for a formal usage audit. And trust me, those can be quite scary if you're using software in a big organization and you're not quite sure who's really using it. So the fourth reason is that you can provide analytics more cost effectively than your customers can. So it's back to this industry best practice point, really. It's saying both you and probably your customers to some extent know the sort of metrics that they'd like to be reporting. They know the sort of outcomes they're going after. But you really know the sector, and you hear about what works by talking to all those customers you've got, by going to industry events and reading publications, all those things you do to stay on top of your game. You can use that insight to add value for your customers. Remember that your R&D spend benefits all of your customers, so the ROI is going to be much better than what individual customers can do. And when you develop a solution, including those analytics, obviously it can be done once and then deployed many times over. So the value is again magnified dramatically. Your customers will stick around. So the bottom line is that analytics can be good for your bottom line. Done well, embedded business intelligence increases customer retention and the average life of a customer. And why is that? Well, you're providing more value, so your customers won't want to replace your solution. And secondly, the more your application is integrated with the rest of your customers' applications, whether that's through inbound data feeds of your application or outbound workflow from your application to other applications they're using, the harder it's going to be to replace. Now, hopefully I've convinced you at this point that it's worth including analytics in your solution. So I'd like to spend some time showing you why we think Yellowfin provides a great set of tools to do that with. So we've explored why analytics should be part of the solution, but why should you use Yellowfin to provide them rather than building them yourself? Here's our top 5 reasons. Now, of course, you could build your own analytics. Perhaps that's what you're doing now. But honestly, why would you spend time and money on reinventing the wheel? By using Yellowfin to do the heavy lifting, you can reduce your development costs, reduce the risk of project failure or delay, and benefit from Yellowfin's ongoing product innovation and security enhancements. We also have flexible pricing models, specially designed for embedded solutions, which can make Yellowfin particularly cost effective. My colleagues will be only too happy to talk to you about some of those. But, Yellowfin does a lot more than just reports and dashboards. So let's take a quick peek at the Yellowfin ecosystem. Now, the point of putting this slide in front of you is really just to bring home that point about how much it might cost you to build your own analytics solution. In the middle of this chart, we've got reports and dashboards, and they are, of course, crucial to analytics solutions. But there's more to it than that in a modern analytics environment. Over on the right-hand side, we have what we call stories and present, which is all about data storytelling. And that's about saying, well, okay, I found something interesting, but I need to communicate that effectively to my business stakeholders and users. Because if the message doesn't get out or doesn't get to the right people, then there won't be any action taken on it. And quite frankly, it wasn't much point in creating those insights in the first place. So Yellowfin has the tools to help you to do that. We can package up the analytics and present them in a way that makes them appealing and allow people to collaborate on them. And not just get it to them, but get it to them in a secure way, which allows you to keep your information within the Yellowfin environment. And that can be important in regulated industries where otherwise there's a risk that you download data, turn it into a spreadsheet, and then who knows where that spreadsheet ends up. If you can keep it all within your analytics environment and keep and retain visibility of who's accessing that information, then that's great from a compliance perspective. We'll see some of these components in action shortly, so we'll move on. So the second reason why you should use Yellowfin is that integrating with Yellowfin is actually really easy. Now, you've probably heard that implementing a business intelligence tool is hard, and in a certain sense it can be, because it's not really the tool very often, it's the business of actually figuring out what you need to report on. So deciding how your business works, because a tool can help you present information, but the real challenge is figuring out, well, what is it that you want to present? But you're going to have to do that anyway. When it comes to actually delivering the functionality, with Yellowfin, it's really, really easy. We support a wide range of deployment options for a start. So whether you want to deploy on-premise, whether you want to run in the cloud, or even a containerized deployment in either the cloud or on-premise, Yellowfin's got your back on that. We can help you. We have really minimal prerequisites. Essentially, it's Java and a database. It's not absolutely any database, but all of the major databases are supported, both as data sources and also as the repository which Yellowfin needs to store all its information about users and content and so on. We provide a rich set of APIs and JDBC connectivity to a wide range of data sources. So this is about embedding and how Yellowfin can be used by ISVs. So over on the left-hand side, yes, we've got REST APIs primarily. We also have some SOAP APIs and JavaScript APIs as well. So depending on exactly how you want to integrate with Yellowfin, there's a few options there. But the bottom line is that you can integrate with Yellowfin from almost any programming environment using one or more of those approaches. And when it comes to reaching data, as I mentioned, we're primarily accessing it via JDBC. We also support some XMLA, and it is possible to develop some more exotic connectivity if there's a real need for doing that. But any database, really you're going to be able to get to with the JDBC data source nowadays. So we've got you there. And our recommendation would normally be to pull your data in from multiple sources and integrate it into a database before you start trying to do analytics on that. That generally works best. It means the data is most reliable, you get the performance, and you don't impact your operational systems when you're running analytic queries against them. But there will be times when you might want to run some queries against your production systems. Maybe it'll be you've identified something and you just want to pull up customer details or pull up order details, or reach out and pull up small queries just to support the workflow side of analytics. Because a real story about Yellowfin is that you do analytics, but we want to make them actionable, and we can help you to do that. And some of that might well involve doing little lookups against your operational data. You can, and that touches on the bottom right here, where I'm saying you can implement workflows with action buttons and URL links. So I mean, Yellowfin isn't a workflow tool as such, but we do include support via what we call action buttons and URLs within reports, where you can have clickable links within reports and dashboards, which will take you out to other applications. And you can include context from the cell within a table to do that. So if you're looking at a particular product in a report, you can have a button in the cell in a report which will open up maybe a reorder button for that product, or pull up the product details, open a catalog screen. Or if you're in maybe an HR report, you can go straight from there to the screen where you can make an update to that employee or grant them additional leave or anything of those sorts, really, provided that there's a way into those applications via a URL. There's a lot in the box, but you don't have to use it all until you're ready. You can start small and then add the additional functionality within Yellowfin as those needs arise. But it's great to know that functionality is there waiting for you when you do need it. So the next reason that we think Yellowfin is a great fit, particularly for ISVs and some larger organizations as well, where it's enterprise customers. But today we're focused on what we call ISVs, so software companies primarily providing solutions out to third-party organizations, is multi-tenancy. So that's the ability to have a single instance of Yellowfin serving or providing a solution to multiple clients. So if you've got the example we're going to come on to a bit later is a drinks wholesaler selling things out to a whole bunch of retail clients. Each of those retail client organizations could be served from a single Yellowfin instance, if that's the way that you want to implement things. And there are certainly benefits to doing that. You can, in Yellowfin's approach, you're allowed to white label the individual tenants, so you can give the custom look and feel to each of those retail clients, give them their own branding and styling, helping your tool to look like part of their own application ecosystem or infrastructure. And it really simplifies your release management, because the content that you publish to what we call the default or primary organization can be viewed then by all of the client organizations. So when you update that, you change it once, and it's immediately available to all of those client organizations. It's also possible to develop private content within client organizations. So you can give them you can develop organization-specific reports, or you can allow them to create their own content, and that isn't visible to any other client, or indeed to the primary organization, unless they give you a login to their client organizations. You can apply styling, so getting a little bit technical there, but custom so CSS styling can be applied at the individual client org level if you want to as well. And user access is definitely managed at that level. So you can create an administrator for each of those client organizations, and it's just like they had their own instance of Yellowfin. Effectively, the only difference is that they can't create, they can't do their own multi-tenancy within your multi-tenancy. It's a single level of primary organization and client orgs, but that's really the only limitation I'll come across. Another very useful feature of multi-tenancy is what's really a security feature, which we call data source substitution. So the way that this works is that you can build your reports in your default organization using either some of your own data or sample data as a data source, but then you can configure it so that when that report is actually run in the context of a client organization, a different data source is used, and you define for that what that mapping should be from the data source in the default org to the data source in your client org. So that's really important. So I mean, that allows you to have a different database potentially for each client. It can either be a different database, or it could be a different schema within the database. It's up to you how much separation you want to provide, or how much separation your clients require. But either of those is possible, and so they make a different database connection, and obviously then database security kicks in, and they can only see what's visible through that connection. So again, it gives you the ability to use different users, different views, different schemas, different database. Can even be in completely different physical location if you want at that point, when you've provided the data source configuration. And that's really powerful. But it's also really simple. It's very easy to set up. I think you can see how that could be useful. it's one of Yellowfin's two main mechanisms for providing client data segregation. The other alternative being to have a shared database with row-level access controls, and that's typically then configured using a feature that we call access filters. They're both very secure, but in some organizations and some industries, the comfort blanket, if you want to think of it that way, of having completely separate databases is useful, and that's where the client source substitution comes in. All of which brings us on to our fourth reason for choosing Yellowfin, which is security more generally. Yellowfin has highly configurable security, and it is a very secure platform. But at its heart, its security model is very simple. In order to access Yellowfin content, the user must first have an active session. That can either be obtained by logging in through the web user interface, the usual sort of user ID and password, or a supported single sign-on mechanism, or it can be through some form of application integration. We'll see a bit of that from a user perspective a bit later, but effectively your application can perform single sign-on to Yellowfin behind the scenes and log on behalf of the user and create a session for them. And then it's up to you whether you want to allow the user to also have the ability to log in directly to Yellowfin, or whether it's all served in an embedded fashion. So first step is then, yes, signing on to Yellowfin, getting a session. So having got a session, what can the user do? Well, again, there's some differences here depending on whether we're talking about logging into the default Yellowfin web user interface, or whether we're talking about an embedded context. Here we're talking primarily about the default interface. In an embedded context, all of these features are available, but you have even more control over what users can do. But each user has a role, and a role consists of a set of permissions, and those permissions determine what functionality within the product the user can use. So that's things like, am I allowed to create a report? If I am allowed to create a report, am I allowed to implement drill down? If I can create a report, am I allowed to create a dashboard to put it in? Can I share the report? Can I export the report? All these sorts of things. It's very fine-grained control is available. There are out-of-the-box roles, so which can then be customized if you wish. So we've come up with a working set of roles, default roles, which many people are perfectly happy to use as they are, but you have the ability to customize them and add and remove permissions to suit your needs. So that will determine what you can do. The question then is, well, what can you do it to? So access to content is assigned either to individual users or more typically via user groups. And that can be done either at the level of a content folder or an individual report or dashboard. And then access to data can be further restricted using access filters, which enable you to do row-level security. We're not going to get into the detail of how you do all of that, but it is pretty straightforward to set up. And once it's set up, it can be applied easily to all the reports that you build. So the fifth reason why we think Yellowfin makes a great choice for doing this is that you can empower your users with self-service analytics. So building your own reports and dashboards, building them for your users is great, and obviously that's likely to be the core of what you provide to them. But you can go beyond that. You don't have to anticipate all of their questions. By embedding Yellowfin's self-service BI capabilities, which known as guided natural language query and assisted insights, you can empower those end users to explore and analyze their data independently and foster a data-driven culture within their organizations. You can even embed Yellowfin's report and dashboard builders with their intuitive drag and drop interface to allow users to easily create interactive dashboards, perform ad hoc analyses, and share insights with stakeholders. And we'll see a little bit of how you can do that later. So the bottom line is, by democratizing data access and analysis, you'll enable your customers to make informed decisions, spot emerging trends, and seize opportunities. And that's really what Yellowfin is all about. It's about helping people to actually use the insights to deliver the business benefit. So the screenshots here on the left, but we'll come back and look at natural language query in a moment in the live demo. It's a way of constructing questions and automating the creation of visualizations, which we'll touch on in a moment. And assisted insights, which we may or may not have time to look at, is a feature which allows the users to discover what's driving their key metrics. There are two features which you can just about make out. I'm sorry, it's slightly blurry on this slide. There's explain and compare. And explain is really just asking Yellowfin to look at the metric that's being displayed in the chart that you've popped up that context menu on and say, right, tell me about what drives this metric. And by that, we mean make use of the dimensional model, which was created in order to build that visualization in the first place, and drill down a layer or two. So it will look at the related dimensions in combinations. It will look at two-dimensional analysis and three-dimensional analysis, and it goes through and performs a ranking to decide, well, what's most important, and then we'll then report that back to the users. And it provides this kind of a set of charts and system-generated narrative text, really explaining what's going on in those charts and pointing out interesting facts about the data. You think of it as the kind of stuff that if you went to one of your data analysts and said, okay, tell me about this, this is the kind of stuff that they would start with. They would produce this. But it's going one step further and kind of weeding out the stuff that's obviously not interesting and just giving you the potentially most valuable insights. Right, I think we've talked enough about that. Let's have some action and move on to a live demo. I can't see any questions yet, so I'm hoping that means there aren't any. If you do have any, feel free to stick them in the chat, and we'll pick them up a little bit later. So I'm going to share my screen. So what we've got here is a demonstration application which we've built. So we've taken real data related to the distribution of liquor in the US as it happens and built a demonstration application around that. Big Fish, which you'll see mentioned in various places in the demo, is a fictitious web-based B2B commerce platform that allows its clients to create, review, and manage their liquor orders, supported by relevant contextual analytics. You remember, that's coming back to the point. The point about embedding is that you're going beyond just analytics, and you're using analytics to support some kind of business process, and hopefully that's what you'll see we can do with Yellowfin here. So Yellowfin has been completely rebranded to align with the Big Fish brand, and we're using Yellowfin's multi-tenant capabilities to host multiple clients within a single Yellowfin instance, and we'll have a look at that in a moment. So we're looking here at a login screen for the application. So it's not technically a Yellowfin login, it's a login to our application, which in this case is a Java application, Java web application. We're logging in, user ID, password, and in this case, a client organization, which would be fairly typical for some kind of extranet portal. So we'll log in. Get rid of that. Having done that, we're looking at a Java application which has been designed to showcase the embedding of Yellowfin content. And the key idea is providing contextual analytics, which encourage the business user to take the most appropriate actions in order to drive the best business outcomes. So the content on this page is a mixture of application content and content which has been provided by Yellowfin via its API. So the Yellowfin content includes not only charts, but also stories. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse waving around in the top right-hand corner there, but you get the highlights. Highlights are coming. Those are the stories in the top right. We'll have a look at those in a moment. And that's back to that data storytelling piece that we were talking about. You can see a wide range of different chart types here. We've got big number charts. We've got vertical and horizontal column charts. Over on the right-hand side here, we've got signals. And again, that's a really interesting area that we'll touch on in a moment. Looking at this store orders report here, you notice that all of the stores are from Walmart. We logged in as Walmart. And again, what that's showing is the the multi-tenancy piece kicking in. So the Yellowfin security model is ensuring that the user we've logged in with can only see stores from Walmart. If we were to just take a moment and log out of the application and log back in with a different user, Tom Sawyer this time, into another tenant, Sam's Club in this case, and scroll down to that same point in the report, you can see that oh wait, that's a bit further down. So yeah, the store orders this time are now all for Sam's Club stores. So a small point, but the context is the user has determined the content that's actually displayed here. So another feature Yellowfin I want to share is if we can, using the embedding capabilities, if I click on one of these items, immediately it's popping up an embedded dashboard. So you've got a slide out control there. So this is technically implemented as a Yellowfin dashboard, and it's slid it out, and it's taken through the context. So I clicked on the top one, store 6514, and we can see that that's come through to the title. It's also represented, it's the highlighted bar in the chart and the highlighted dot on a GIS chart that we've got there. And there's a whole raft of different visualizations down here, not all of them are store specific. Within that, again, this is the application that's implementing this. We've got category orders there. If we click on this one, we get a slightly different dashboard's being called this time. But again, the context is being passed through. So the gins in this case are coming through, and we've got content based on that. But what we're showing here is that you can have that content. I believe that's not actually a Yellowfin report. I think that's the list of categories I think comes back from Yellowfin, but the actual table I think is then constructed by the Java application. But the point is that you can then through the API retrieve the content for the dashboard and display it in a pop-up box if you want. It's just one style of making use of Yellowfin content, which I wanted to show you. So let's have a look at some of that other content I talked about. I'm not sure why that's sitting there. Go away. The stories. So stories, again, really a useful part of Yellowfin for getting the message to the right people in your users. A story is rather like a data-focused blog post. It can contain multiple charts, tables, images, and even of course, your own narrative text, free-form text you can type in. It can even include YouTube videos at the end. But it's not just static content. The reports can be interactive. You can choose how interactive they are. Obviously, up to you whether you build interactive content or not. But if you have built interactive reports, then they are clickable. You can see the pop-ups are coming here. This one's not drillable, but if it were a drillable report, then I could drill into it directly from the story, and that's really quite powerful. There's also collaboration features built into the story itself. So obviously I can see who the author is, and I can see the collaborators. I can also write comments on it. So using this feature here, I can pop in, start a new conversation about the report, and I can start entering comments. So I can say, great story, Joe. Typically do something a bit more informative than that, but it pops up and other people can then see that, or I could have chosen to make it visible only to the owner of the post. I have a couple of choices there, but people can like my comment, they can respond to the comment, all the usual things that you see on blog posts are available here, which is again quite powerful. You can also see at the top we have the ability to clap, so just a flag that you thought the post was useful and so on. The image at the top there is perhaps worth mentioning. Yellowfin's got a nice image manager, so you can upload corporate images that you'd like people to use when they're creating their blog posts, and also when they're building reports and so on. And you can put some management around that, so you can control, if you wish to, which users can use those images. And you can have some which are reserved for specific purposes, like marking reports as being approved content, as opposed to just ad hoc reports put together by an ordinary user, in inverted commas. So I mentioned other kinds of content. So we had signals. Now signals are really interesting. So let's have a look at one of those. What we're seeing here is that through the API, again, we're able to pull back the list of signals. There's various ways you can do that. You can either embed the content using the JavaScript API and have it show up the same way that it would within the Yellowfin standard interface, or you can pull back the text within it in an array format, and then format it as you want. So this one's been formatted in a custom manner, but we can sort of click on it, and then what's popping up here is the standard Yellowfin presentation of an individual signal. So each signal is kind of is rather like a mini analyst report. It highlights something in your data that you might want to be aware of or investigate further. And you can see the signal on a timeline. When did it occur? And the Yellowfin will also show you other signals that occurred around that time on the timeline. You can see related signals. You can see related metrics. So this metric is talking about sales amount. So with also related metrics, and by related, obviously that's determined by statistically related. And you can see a degree of correlation between those metrics and the metric that's underpinning the signal. So that's all quite really useful. We can change the time frame that we're looking at here. There's a time bar slider. So if I want to see, well, how many of those signals occurred over a wider time interval, well, not many in this case, but that can be quite flexible in terms of homing in and seeing, right, is this something that happens just once, or does it happen regularly? If it happened really regularly, then it probably wouldn't show up as a signal, because then you'd have filtered it out as actually being a pattern in itself. So we can also look at relevance, and the idea of relevance here is just trying to say, put that signal in some kind of context. You can think of it as really saying, look, how worried about this should I be? How important is it really in the great scheme of things? That's what that's trying to do. A detailed discussion of how it does that is probably beyond the scope of this talk, but it's something that we can explain in more detail in a follow-up call if that's of interest. There's also some analysis that's related to that metric. Again, this is very similar to the text that will be popped up if you asked Yellowfin to explain the metric in a chart. It gives you another idea of the kind of information that you get. So it decides on the best visualization to use to present the insight that it's found, and this is all system-generated narrative on the right-hand side. But we can go beyond system-generated narrative. I mean, that's what we're seeing in there. There's also this discussion piece. So again, a signal is something that you might want to have some discussion around, saying, perhaps we should pause and say, well, what kinds of signals are there? So the kind of things that they're doing. This one was a spike where it's just popped above the trend line. You can see things where it steps up or where it steps down, or even where the slope of a line changes dramatically. You can see outliers of various kinds in your data. You can spot when a category value either appears, so something that it wasn't seeing in the data before and has and exceeds a certain threshold contribution to the metric, or where one disappears. So if you were seeing a contribution, say one of your stores was contributing 20% on a reliable basis, and all of a sudden it just stopped, disappeared from the data altogether, then Signals will pick that up for you. Now, if it's a store, then the most likely thing is probably its data transmissions is broken rather than it got blown up or whatever. But you'll spot that. You'd probably know about it if the store had blown up. But you might not know about it if it just had a problem with its data transmissions, and Signals would be one way that you might pick that up. What it does for you is you can run it in the background. You tell it what you want to look for. So you tell it which metrics you want it to focus on, what dimensions, and you tell it what time frame you want it to look at and how often you want it to run the tasks to go looking for these kinds of signals themselves. That's going to work. Those are called signals tasks, and you can schedule those. And they can be scheduled at a wide variety of time intervals. So, I mean, typically they run against large amounts of data, so you probably don't want to schedule them to run super frequently. But we do have customers running them every minute in some cases. Sometimes you only want to run once a week. It just really depends what your business context is as to how often you would run them. But the output is always this sort of format. Up at the top, it's not just comments. We have some more collaboration features around these. So I can watch the signal. That will tell me if someone else makes a comment on it, but I also have various actions, so I can take ownership of the signal. And what that really is saying is, look, I'm a data analyst, or at least someone who's responsible for explaining what's going on in the business. So I say, I've seen this report, I'm going to take it, and I will look into it. So obviously that's most relevant if you've got a team of data analysts or a team of business analysts who then divide up the work of monitoring performance and explaining things. If you're the manager of such a team, you can assign it to one of your team. Equally, if you look at it and say, you know what, we know all about that, it's not very interesting, you can just dismiss it or close it altogether. So various things that can be done to just manage that flow of information. And there's a useful button over there which says, actually, is this report something I want to see again? If it is, then you can click on the useful, and then Yellowfin takes that into account when deciding which ones to show to you personally. So depending on which ones you click, the next time you come into the system, you may see different signals from your colleagues on the team, even though it's working off the same data. So far, what we've been looking at, we're just a reminder, we're on this order management tab. So this is within the context of an application which we've made. So it's a Java application, and we're pulling Yellowfin content through and surfacing it in that application. Over on the right-hand side of it, we've got My Dashboards. And what the purpose of this is just showing you, you see that the URL is subtly changing here. We've actually got Yellowfin listening on a different port, on the same domain, but different port. And now we're looking at Yellowfin. It's a white labeled version of Yellowfin. It's branded to look, it's a big fish, and we're seeing still the Sam's Club based on who's logged in and so on, and a bunch of icons. This whole upper section, the header section as we call it, is actually common. So when I move between the application and Yellowfin, the top section of the screen looks exactly the same, and that's by design. And in fact, that's one of the most common ways of building an integration between an application and Yellowfin when you want to provide access to the Yellowfin standard UI. So you might use some reports and display them in your own application, heavily embedded. But if you want to allow users to build their own content, then one way of doing it is to give them access to the Yellowfin UI, but controlling what parts of the product they're allowed to use. Again, that can be based on the roles that you provide, but also based on, well, what do you actually put in this header section? You can see I have got an ability here to create, but you don't have to put that in. You can turn that off and not give them the ability to create new content, or you can restrict what types of content they're allowed to create. So this user is fairly highly privileged. They can create new views and even new data sources, but a typical business user obviously wouldn't have access to that. They'd only, if they had access at all, they might have ask a question. We'll touch on that in a moment. They might be allowed to create their own reports, probably not dashboards, but it's possible. But they certainly might be allowed to create stories and maybe presentations. We're not going to look at presentations now, but I'll just mention it. That's kind of similar to stories, but the metaphor there is, instead of just having it all like in a blog post where it's all kind of strung together in a pageless format, a presentation is more like a PowerPoint deck. It's a sequence of slides, but all within the Yellowfin environment. And again, you can add live content to it. So it's great if you want to step through a sequence of reports in a particular order at a monthly report, a monthly board meeting or something. You can package them up in a presentation and they just use the same thing every month, but with the data refreshing to the latest data. So we're looking at My Dashboards. This is a dashboard. To give you a flavor of how dashboards work, we've got some filters over on the left side here. If I click on the premium number, then immediately the reports, the charts over on the right hand side, they'll refresh to take that filter value into account. So in fact, each of these is a separate report, but it has a filter built into it. And in the dashboard, which is like all of what we're looking at here, you can link those together so that when I change the value, it applies it to all of the linked filters and refreshes the reports. That's optional. This dashboard's been configured to refresh as soon as I click on it. You don't have to do that. You can configure it so that the user will have to click apply, which is useful if you've got a lot of filters, and it's going to take in some cases, it might take a bit of time to run the report, depending on what the data source is. And you might say, well, let them make all of their choices and then run it rather than refreshing every time. It's your choice when you build the dashboard. In addition to filters, we can see if I click on one of these segments over here, we get another feature called drill through. This is kind of similar, really, I suppose, to the pull-out dashboard that we saw over on the embedded context, but this is within the standard Yellowfin UI now. I can click on it and a drill through report takes context. So when I click on something, the thing I clicked on, that data point can be passed into the report that I'm drilling through to and used as a filter. And that's what's happened here. So that's really what we see there. What else do I want to show you? Okay, so the last main feature that I want to show you is one called it's the guided natural language query feature. So you can access that by clicking on this Ask a Question button. We can see it here within the Yellowfin UI. And the first thing it's going to do is ask me to say which view I want to access. But just to show you, you can also make that feature available in an embedded context. So we're back now to our application. And I said that it's a common header, but it's at this point it's just a JSP. It's not Yellowfin as such. It's a Java server page, and I can access that exact same functionality here. Asking the view. In this case, there is only one view. So in the application context, I could have just launched it and pre-specified that and gone straight to the next page that I'm going to get when I click on this. But sometimes you might have multiple contexts within your application. I don't know, it depends what sort of service you provide, but say you're in an ITSM context, IT service management, you might want to look at incident-based reports, or you might want to look at requests, or you might want to look at problem management, and those might be contexts. Each of those might have its own view in Yellowfin terms. Here, though, so there's just one view. We'll access the data. So at that point, our view on guided natural language query is that we want to help our business users to construct valid questions. So we're aware that some of our competitors allow business users to type in free format text, which they then either try to interpret, turn it into a well-structured question, which they may or may not show to the business user, or sometimes they'll just literally take what you've typed in and use that more like a Google search and try to find pre-built reports with similar titles, or maybe using similar metrics. So various things. But I think our view is that can be pretty hit and miss. You don't really know, and the user can't be sure whether the question they think they're asking is what the tool is actually answering. So our approach is to help them to build a well-constructed question. So what we did was we went out and we looked at, well, what are the questions that business users are really asking, and sought to make that easy through this kind of wizard-style interface. So if we pick a simple one, I don't know, let's say top 5, type 5, and we're going to look at, so we have a choice. So we're saying top 5. What do you mean by top 5? Do you mean by value, or do you mean by percentage of the metric? Well, we're going to say top 5 by value. Let's look at the top 5 products by sales amount. So, and we'll say for now we'll just say for all time. Normally you'd probably filter it a bit more than that, but the data is getting slightly old and needs updating. So we'll ask that question. Yellowfin turns that into SQL behind the scenes, retrieves the results, looks at the shape of the results, and says, right, what's the best way of representing that in a chart? And this is what it came up with, which looks pretty good to me. You can also display the tabular data if you want to. Again, that's quite a nice format as well. In this case, it depends obviously what the report is, what's going to be the best way of presenting it. You can go with either. You can take this content straight out of the NLQ and add it into a story or a presentation if you wish to, or you can put it into a dashboard. Now, whatever you do at that point, what it's really doing is it's taking the Yellowfin report, which has been generated behind the scenes, and you then save it, and it's that report you can then embed into those different constructs. But it takes you and puts you into the right place to do that. If I want to, I can then I can edit the question, go back and tweak it, or I can ask a completely new question. So I know we might say show units sold by brand. Again, we're going to stick with all time because I can't remember quite where the data is. All time. And this time it's decided to show me in it as a tabular version of the graph, which is quite nice. And that is pretty much what I wanted to show you in the live part of the demonstration. Let me just see if there's any questions appeared. Can't see anything. If you have got any, do type away. In which case I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a minute. So the Q&A is, I don't see anything live coming in here. I would say some of the questions that we often get asked are around programming environments we support. The ones we most commonly see, Java. Obviously, Yellowfin's built in Java, so that's well supported. We see quite a lot of Python. We've got customers building applications in .NET. Delphi is quite common. That's obviously one of ours, an in-house within the Idera stable, one of our sister companies, and that is easy to integrate with Yellowfin as well. If you've got any old IBM System I systems out there that you want to add analytics to, then you should talk to another of our sister companies, Lancer, who've also embedded Yellowfin within that. It's called Lancer BI, and that's a good example of how you can embed Yellowfin within another product and get analytics in there. So if we've whetted your appetite, there's a few links there. I'll leave that up for a minute so you can scan those QR codes if you want. We've got some blogs on the website, some nice posts. There's a whole raft of information. I just picked out some there which are relevant to an ISV context and the sort of thing we've been talking about. The website down at the bottom there, yellowfinbi.com. You can find loads of information in the resources, get access to case studies, and perhaps most importantly, at the moment, we're offering a free proof of concept. So if this looks like something that you might be interested in, you probably want to get onto the website sooner rather than later and get one of those POCs set up. We can help you to understand what it is you're trying to do and put together a tailored demonstration to really help you to get a flavor of what Yellowfin can do for you. And we've got a couple of minutes left, but I'm still not seeing any questions coming in from the floor. All very shy today. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything, so I think I'm going to give you a few minutes of your time back and say thank you very much for joining us today. We do hope that you'll get in touch with us. You'll get a follow-up email after the event in any case to see whether there's anything we can help you with. But if you want to get in even quicker, then do jump on the website and start looking around. There's some good demonstrations on there. We've got some YouTube videos that you can have a look at as well. But otherwise, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to speaking to you in due course. Thanks, everyone.